So we're at the beautiful Travis wetland today. Christchurch is made of a lot of marshlands. It's built on a lot of marshlands, and there's a lot of this sort of land around. This may also be a cause of having that much liquefaction during and after the earthquakes. Beautiful. Glorious day for it too. Christchurch has got some gorgeous nature. There's all these parks everywhere. They call it the Garden City. There's all these beaches. It's great places for contemplation. So, my name is Ivona and I'm recording the series of videos because after a few events in my life, I had something that had the symptoms of chronic fatigue syndrome or post-traumatic stress syndrome. I'm recording all these videos just to let you know what it was like to be in the earthquakes and to experience it a little bit from my perspective, and to record some strategies that have helped me to get over it and to be able to do everything I want to do again. It's been a big journey, but yes, it's getting better and better and better. And all this beautiful nature and all this contemplation and all these lovely spots, it has helped enormously. So I've just recovered from the flu. For 3 nights straight, I slept 15 hours a night. That brought me right back to the years of when I used to sleep about 12 hours a night, every night. That's part of what chronic fatigue does to you. You sleep, and you never feel well rested. But nowadays, look at this water. That's pretty much how calm my mind is now. And that helps a lot as well. There was a lot of other stuff going on as well. For example, I could work 6 hours, do another 6 hours the next day, but then I couldn't do anything for the next 3 days. I had to recuperate. So many things happened to my body, and it's absolutely amazing that I came out of it and that I'm happy and healthy again. It's definitely worth sharing. So that's why I'm starting this YouTube channel. I hope you benefit from all of the strategies that I'm going to upload as well. So I don't know if I had chronic fatigue or if I had post-traumatic stress syndrome, but everybody around me had very similar symptoms. It was numbing, like there were hardly any emotions that came up. You're always tired, you hardly ever have any energy, no enthusiasm to do anything, nothing that interests you in doing anything. After you do something, you get really tired and you really have to recover for a little while. Anxiety, mainly in the sacral and solar plexus areas. But when the doctor asked, why do you have anxiety, can you pinpoint it? I could not. There was just no cause for it. I used to have headaches all the time. The organs in my tummy played up, all sorts of stuff like that. The main thing was I basically had no life. I was tired all the time. No full-time work, nothing like that. Yeah, everybody got diagnosed with chronic fatigue, post-traumatic stress syndrome, depression, anxiety, and there were a lot of counsellors, and counselling was free just after the earthquakes. So that, I think, was very, very beneficial for everybody. I don't know what started it off. It might have been earthquakes. It might have been working night shift for about 3.5 years, like middle of the night, finishing work in the morning. It might have been that my cat passed away. There were a lot of different factors. I've had a couple of operations back in those days as well. There could be a lot of contributing factors. Who knows? I don't like carrying labels, so I never got it actually diagnosed. I never did any proper tests or anything. However, I did go to the GP when I needed to, and I never accepted any medication either. I don't like taking medication. So the main thing I did was sleep as much as my body needed to sleep. I believe that when a person sleeps, every cell in the body rejuvenates itself. You heal yourself when you're sleeping. Also, every time after you rest and you don't actually feel well rested, you don't feel like you have the energy, keep resting, keep doing it. Rest is very, very beneficial. And that's one of the things that helped me a lot. Slowly and gradually. Lots of rest, lots of patience, lots of self-care. Now, I'm a very positive person, and that's one of the things that I had to really implement as well. I had to become acutely aware of all of my thoughts, also because the doctor asked, when do you get anxiety? And I couldn't tell, because there was no cause for it. Be aware of your thoughts, and if it's a negative thought that pops in, change it, rearrange it, change it to a more positive one. You'll feel better straight away. In one of my two favourite places, I love the water. I live 5 minutes drive, less than 5 minutes drive from the beach. And here's another one, Travis Wetland, love it. Perfect place to do some contemplation, which is what I will do next. So, we had an earthquake on the 4th of September 2010, 4:35 in the morning. I was working night shift, I was working. 4 of us were working that night, and we had about 100 patrons in the bar that I was managing that night. There were lots of people in town. There was another bar just closing. There were other bars, many more than a couple, and the staff there was just having staff drinks, and they were still inside the bars as well. The other bars that closed a little bit earlier, their staff had come to us already, hence we had about 100 people there, I'd say. On the news, they said that everybody was asleep at 4:35 in the morning. So this is my testimony that this is incorrect. Anyway, the lights, we had lights hanging from the ceiling, and they started swaying, and because I was moving so much, running around, running the bar, I didn't notice the beginning that the ground started moving and things like that. But I did notice that the music stopped and started. I noticed, obviously, that the lights went on and off. The hanging lights from the ceiling were all swaying heaps and heaps. And it was weird. It was not something I'd ever experienced before. When I think back to that night, out of all the patrons that were inside the bar, about a third hid against the wall or underneath the bar, or, you know, they sought some hiding place. Another third ran outside, ran away, went home, went to find their loved ones, all sorts of stuff. They just sprung into action. and another third absolutely froze on the spot. I was in the managing mindset, so I stopped and I noticed the building was standing and people were there and everything was real. And then I continued with moving, checking everything out, making sure everything was fine. Everybody that we still had there was all right. One guy, he was a security guard at one of the bars. He was crying outside. After it subsided a bit, he was crying outside the front of the bar because he couldn't get in touch with his loved ones. There were people in the beer garden. They still wanted to have more drinks. So there's two extremes. I went downstairs in the cellar, checked everything there, keg room, checked everything there. To be honest, it was not very clever because the earthquakes, there wasn't just one earthquake, there were more earthquakes and they were still going. So being in a cellar of a 3-story building is probably not such a good idea. In the beer garden, there was quite a bit of broken glass. The rest of the place was fine. And then afterwards I realised the glass was all by the plastic picnic tables. People must have gotten up in a hurry, moved the tables, bumped the tables, whatever, and the glasses must have fallen over there. So it might not have been from the earthquakes. Everywhere on the table in the bar, the glasses were still upright, so just a wee indication of things. When I went out the front of the bar, all the street lights were off. It was completely pitch black. Then a taxi came round one street and I saw that the bar across the road, all the big windows had shattered completely. That was quite stressful because we had some of their staff in my place, so they came to me and they go like, oh my God, what do we do? What do we do? I just told them, go there, guard it, don't pick anything up, you'll cut yourself, ring the boss. So they left and who knows what they did. That's just my manager's brain taking over. This is probably what you should be doing. So we rode out the September earthquake. Didn't know exactly what was happening. When I got outside, the security guard, our security guard, he said, it's an earthquake, that's what's happening. Oh, okay. I was just trying to make sure everything was going to be all right, you know. The aftermath to that was that I lost my car for about 6 days. It was parked in the garage across the road underneath another bar because we had our car parks there. And we could not get in because the electricity was all cut off. There was no electricity there. The bar didn't reopen for several days after either. Got to make sure everything is safe to let people back in and things like that. So yeah, that was one of the main things, that I lost my car for about a week. That's not good. Everybody always drives everywhere here. Anyway, so then before Christmas, I was up in the office doing some paperwork like I do after my shift, and it's on a mezzanine level. When I was thinking about something, I looked up and I looked into the corner of the wall ceiling, that area. There was so much cracking there that I warned the security guard that if there's another earthquake, I am straight out of here. I don't trust this building anymore. And he laughed, so I said, go upstairs, go and have a quick look. And he did, and he's like, okay. So it's basically one of the things that you learn how to cope with things, and you think about it and you put strategies in place inside your head, because the more you go over something in your head, the better a strategy you'll have when it actually happens. That's what sports people do too, right? They visualize that they're winning. They visualize, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and by visualizing it, You actually bring it into your awareness already. So my strategy for the next earthquake, if I was still there, was going to be like, I'm out of here. I decided to resign because I didn't want to work in a 3-story building. I didn't want to look after people, things like that. So I went on to manage a motel. That was better because it was 2 stories and it had 10 rooms, so a maximum of I think 25 people, 26 people that I was having to manage if I had to. And guess what? It happened. In the February earthquake, I was still at the motel. Yeah, but after the September one and the rest of the, people call them aftershocks, but I think they're all earthquakes. Anyway, it is what it is. It is what people name it. Some people call it aftershocks because it sounds less bad than earthquakes. I resigned and I started working at the motel, and that was quite good. Life has changed quite a bit since then. When it happened again in February, I was hanging up a net curtain in one of the rooms, and the exit to that particular bedroom was the door, only one door. I was in front of a pane of glass which was moving as well as everything else, and there was a bed behind me which was on wheels, and it went from one wall of that room to the other wall of that room, so there was no way I could get out of there. I could have jumped on the bed, I thought about, so that's my strategy for next time I'm ever in that situation again. But it won't happen because I resigned from the motel as well. By then, quite a few of the foreign friends, the bartenders and people in travelling type jobs, they had already left. They'd gone back to continue travelling, gone back to where they came from, whatever it was where they went back to. They didn't want to stay in Christchurch, and fair enough. I mean, the general attitude is, oh, it can happen in Christchurch, it happened in Napier in the 60s, I believe. They had to rebuild the whole of it, and it's now a nice Art Deco town. So in Christchurch there's still a lot of building sites, and we are getting a new city, and it will happen eventually. Eventually. So when I was at the motel, all the 10 rooms were full. One room, all the guests came back apart from one room. They stayed away, but the good thing was he came back after breakfast the next morning, and he told me he stayed with his wife, who was in Christchurch. They were together in Christchurch for elective surgery, so he stayed in the hospital with his wife, who was already there. That was a good thing. So all my guests were there. They were all accounted for. The ones who wanted to leave could leave. They got a refund of the money, etc. It's just, you just cope with it, right? That moment in time there was no electricity and there was no water for, I think in a motel it was a couple of days no water. It wasn't too bad. So we had to deal with it the way we could. My cell phone was working because I was with one particular company, and the guests in the motel used it to call overseas and everywhere. I walked around the building at the time and inspected everything. It seemed to be okay. By then there were cars in the middle of the road. There's a big median in the middle of the road, so all these cars were just parked there, and they were there for at least 2 days because I had to stay at the hotel for another couple of days. I saw a big massive sinkhole appear. It was at least 2 meters in diameter. I started watching it and I was just mesmerized because it was like nothing I'd ever seen, not in the movies or nothing. A big sinkhole, more than 2 meters wide, just appeared on the corner of the road. Amazing. Obviously I went outside straight away because I don't want to be in buildings. I saw my car parked in the carport at the motel and it was just swaying from side to side. I remember thinking, I hope it doesn't swing against the wall. But it didn't. But it was really strange how it kept on moving and moving and moving. Obviously, I took photos of things that had broken because by now we know what's going on. We know how to deal with things. And took photos, cleaned up all the mess, cleaned up all the glass because we had a dog there that I was looking after as well as the motel. And it was just general chaos for the day. Anyway, everything got sorted out. The next day I went for a walk with the dog, ran into some friends and they told me that one of our friends had died. That was Joe from the Oimanua memorial video. It didn't really sink in. I mean, everything was rattled, everything was shaking, everything was moving. It was just too much, too much. So even when I attended the funeral, which was one of the biggest funerals in a long time, they had to block off the road and there was a helicopter filming it and things like that. Cars were parked in 2 different paddocks. It was so busy. That's kind of like when it started sinking in, because all our mutual friends were there and we all had stories to tell and we all had emotions to show. Yeah, very interesting times. Very stressful, but somehow you cope with it. 2 full days later I went home just to have a look because I was running the motel for a fortnight. The people that owned it were away overseas. So a couple of days later I went home just to check. There was no water, there was no power, there was still a bit of a mess, so I cleaned that up. The drive home was 2.5 hours instead of 20 minutes. Bad roads, blocked off roads, liquefaction everywhere, just potholes, I don't know, I just couldn't get through. The flatmate seemed to be doing alright, but she did have a friend to stay because she didn't want to be alone. It's one of those times when you do need people around you. It's a little bit like a reality check. It's good to have people around you. It's good to talk. So I lost my flatmate because of the February earthquake. Her car was in town for 4.5 months or something like that. She couldn't get to it because all of the CBD was blocked off by various armies from various countries. Weren't allowed in. Her bar was the bar across the road from when I was running the bar, and it was shut. It was caved in, the roof caved in, and it was shut, and she didn't have a job. So after a little while she moved away, and then she moved somewhere else, and then she moved to where she is now, and finally she's found happiness again. That's really nice. Anyway, a lot of things have happened. She did get her car back eventually, actually. What she had to do actually on the February, she was in the bar doing some daytime stuff that a general manager would do, and she walked all the way home. It took her an hour and a half as she walked through liquefaction, which was down the bottom of the road where we live, and she just had to throw out the boots and all of the clothes she was wearing. It was absolutely disgusting. So that's 2 of the main earthquakes. There's obviously been heaps and heaps more. Practice makes perfect. We all devise a plan in our heads, what we will do, what feels best for us, what we need to do. That's why I left running the bar. There were a couple of other reasons as well, but yeah. My choice, go outside. I'm not staying inside of any building. Be prepared if something like that happens. Go over things in your head so that you form a strategy. Once you have a strategy, stick with it. That's fine. Going over things in your head may cause anxiety or depression, so don't mull over it. Just form the strategies that you need. I know that for several years what happened after the earthquakes was everybody was always on edge. I know I was always on edge. Every time I had to go into a new building, I looked at where the exits were to where I was, the room I was, the building I was in, all that kind of stuff. I made sure that none of the exits were ever blocked, because that happened to a colleague of mine back in Belgium a long time ago when I was still studying hospitality management. So make sure never have the exits blocked. I used to stay a bit closer to home. I know that there were quite a few people that didn't want to go out at night time. They just stayed home. They stayed really close to home in general anyway. Most people made sure that the tank in the car was full of gas. They never went without petrol. After the earthquakes, all the petrol stations have to be checked because of the tanks that are underneath it. So the petrol stations close to me were all shut for quite some time. So we all had to go to the other side of town to get petrol. We have a car full of petrol, cell phone charged, food in the house for several days, water in the garage. You learn to live with it. You learn to plan. There's new tsunami sirens out on the beach. They get tested twice a year, I believe. There's a really good Crowquake website. It has good explanations on it. It records all of the earthquakes. There's another site called GeoNet, but I prefer Crowquake or Quake Crow. I'll put a link below. We've had hundreds and hundreds of earthquakes, thousands of earthquakes. But the funny thing is, before September 4th, 2010, we already had 100 earthquakes, according to that site. They were little ones, and it was just like if there was a bus driving past your house, or a truck or something, and your house just moved slightly. Then when you look outside, there is no bus. So, now we know, oh yeah, it's definitely earthquakes. But before September 4th, 2010, we were like, oh yeah, it must be a bus, and we just continued on our merry way. Funny that. Life has changed a lot. So I hope this gives you a little bit of insight into what it was like during the earthquakes. And I will record some more sometime later, and it will be more about chronic fatigue syndrome, post-traumatic stress syndrome, and how to get over it. There are some exercises already on my YouTube channel, so have a look at those as well. And other than that, look after yourself and enjoy this day.